Hello and welcome to the Shiny Bees podcast, a podcast for those who like their knitting, comedy and yarn in equally large measures. I'm your host Jo Milmine, and coming up in today's show we have Enabler's Corner and an interview with Sarah Chai of Socks with Sarah.
I feel a need to laugh again with you, if that's alright. I need a drink, I need a friend.
Hello and welcome to episode 30 of the show, How to Build an Online Community with Sarah Chai of Socks with Sarah. Today is Sunday, the 11th of January. How are you all? It's been quite stormy up here. The Scott Storm has been in full force and everything is fine. I live quite kind of in the urban area of northern Scotland, really, I guess. Not very urban at all, but compared to the likes of the Louises, Cagney and Lacey, up in Thurso and Kedness and Shetland, it's pretty fine actually. It was really windy. I did wake up at one point in Kansas with a witch under the house, but promptly fell back asleep, and when I woke up again I was back in Elgin. It was a little bit sporty, but I used to live on Anglesey, and to be honest it got that windy on Anglesey a lot of the time, so it didn't really bother me too much. There were a few errant trampolines that blew off down the street, I believe, and our recycling all got blown over, despite me tethering it, and it being in the lee of the houses. It did get blown over. I didn't realise this was the case, and we only cottoned on to this when Womble, who is the greediest dog ever, he's a shouty, it's genetic, didn't eat his food right away, so we thought he might actually be dying. Anyway, he wasn't dying, he was just feeling a little fat because he had gone out and helped himself to all the scraps in the scrap bin. Minging. Absolutely minging. That dog has no shame, but he has a very delicate disposition as well, so we were quite concerned as to what explosive after effects might occur as a result of his indiscretion with the scraps bin, but touch wood, very hard, we've been fine so far. Moving on from the inner workings of my dog's digestive system, thank you to everyone who has been in touch since the last episode. It has only been a week and I'm really enjoying being into the podcasting on a more regular schedule, even though it's only been a few weeks now. But thank you to everyone who took the time to get in touch and offer me solidarities and bigging me up after my slight rant about ill-fitting clothing and why we're all so tight on each other and ourselves, and why we don't just make clothes that fit and work with what we've got and stop trying to be pressured into doing things that just aren't going to help and just not helpful, or just getting these ridiculous ideas in our head that we're 2 sizes bigger than we actually are. So thank you very much to everyone who got in touch. I had quite an interesting chat with Jolie of the Jolie's Kitchen podcast on Twitter, who recommended Amy Herzog's class on Craftsy. Just like the custom fit sweater, that's a lady who does the custom fit sweater, and I think she's quite a big fan of knitting things in pieces and then putting it together so that it fits better. And I mean, let's face it, you don't sew things in one piece and expect it to fit nicely. The whole point of when you do a sewing pattern and adjusting the different parts of it to fit gives you more options. Nobody likes really sewing up knitwear. I don't mind it actually, but a lot of people don't like it. They prefer the kind of all-in-one approach because it's a bit less sort of effort and jiggery-pokery right at the end. But that is a good way of getting your knitwear to fit properly, and she has some very good tutorials apparently as part of that Craftsy class. I haven't actually watched it. I believe I did buy it, and it's another one of those that I've not had a chance to even look at, to be honest, but I'll put a link to that in the show notes because Jolie has seen it and does recommend it. She designs her own pattern, and she's a tech editor as well, so I think we can take her word for it if it's good. If anyone else has any thoughts on the custom fit sweater, then please do send them in. It'd be interesting to get a bit of chat going on the group about how people get around this issue of fitting. There has been a bit of again, there was another Twitter explosion last night talking about hashtag make it fit 2015. Once it's got a hashtag, it's got a life of its own. It's like having a pig or a chicken for a pet and giving it a name and then you can't kill it. It's the exact same thing. So there was talk, because Louise Scully was another one who chirped up and said, yeah, you really have to work with what you've got, stop apologising for what you've got, make the most of it and make things that fit, and make 2015 be the year of things that fit, along with Leona of Fluff. And I think it's something that's really valid and something that it does take a bit of time, but if you take that time to learn these skills now and to perfect your art now instead of trying to bodge it like I did, because you're short of time whilst actually wasting time in the end because you've not put the groundwork in, which is something Claire will speak about on the next podcast, I think, then it's going to take you longer and you're not going to get the result you want. You'll have paid a fortune for yarn, you'll have wasted your time and it won't look nice. And that's exactly what happened to me. And it's all about preparation, really. The kind of 7 Ps. Prior preparation prevents piss poor performance. I only know the swearing version, so it's quite difficult. But it's something like that, essentially alluding to the fact that you must put the groundwork in first, otherwise you're going to have a poor performance. So I'm going to speak to Louise about that and see how we go with it. But I think for now, if anyone does have any tips, if you've not yet listened to the last podcast and then you do catch up and you have some kind of gems to share with us, then please do, because there's a lot of really experienced knitters on Ravelry and a lot of people who've probably made the same mistakes that we have before. So it's worth kind of all getting together and cheering each other along and learning from each other's experience, which is one of the most fun parts, really, of the whole Ravelry thing. I have been in a very buoyant mood, you might have noticed this week. Not prompted, really, by anything in particular. I've just been feeling quite buoyant. I'm quite a lively person in general. But I'm not really sure what it is, because it is January and it's meant to be quite depressing. I should be sat here kind of huddled up in my knitwear crying because January's rubbish, but I've just not been feeling that way at all. I've been quite chirpy, got a little bit cheeky, throwing a bit of banter around. It's really good. And I'm not entirely sure why that is the case, but let me sprinkle a little of it your way. Have some sprinkling it on the microphone now, like fairy dust, and sending some buoyant and lively thoughts your way. Things that are going pretty well, actually. My house is nice, my desk is lovely, that my husband sorted out for me, made all nice, my retro leather-topped ladies writing desk. I've been doing a lot more sort of writing and planning for blog posts and ideas and things and articles, which has been really good, and having a desk that you love really helps with that, I think. And I just love my little workspace. It's a very inspiring place to be. I've got some more ideas for how to pimp it up, just to give it that extra kind of added edge. There needs to be a little bit more wool, I'm not going to lie, but after that it should be good. And I'm really enjoying the collaborations that I have ongoing at the moment, and ones that are planned for later on this year. I think that's probably the main kind of thrust of where all this giddiness is coming from, really. I'm very much looking forward to Edinburgh Yarn Festival, and a lot of people are quite giddy about this, and working in the podcast lounge and coming up with lots of evil plans with Louise Scully of Knit British, who's leading the charge on the podcast lounge, and she's got some great ideas, and I think it's going to be quite an enjoyable part of the festival to dip in and out of different things that you enjoy or that look interesting. And we've been having a right laugh with that. It just gets a little bit out of control with her. I don't know why. We just egg each other on massively, and it just degenerates from like dead sensible like work chat to parodies on YouTube within about 30 seconds. It's crazy. She did share a particularly special parody with me, and I will share that with you in the show notes. It is a parody of Blurred Lines, and it's basically a feminist parody of Blurred Lines. You might have seen it before, but it was hilarious. I was actually crying watching it, especially at the part where, because they have, instead of all the girls dancing round and, you know, as this normal kind of patriarchal thing has, the girls all dance around in skimpy knitwear, not knitwear, skimpy clothing rather. If they did dance around in skimpy knitwear, it could be quite funny, slightly ironic, but no, they're just dancing around in really short shorts and like hose basically. And the boys are obviously stood there with all the bling on, going a lot, like there's some kind of big pimp daddy. And I'm not a fan of R&B, as you can probably tell. I think it's rubbish. Not that Blurred is particularly R&B, but I'm not a fan of R&B in general, because there are no lyrics. It's just, the beats are good. I can get down with the beats. I like rap, even though that's a lot about kind of your hoes and shooting cops and stuff. That's fine because it actually has some kind of artistic merit. But R&B just seems to be, my bitches, I can go all night, Why don't you stay up all night and write some proper bloody lyrics that rhyme, that tell a story, that have some artistic merit? Because I'm sorry, R&B has no artistic merit. And even if you made a brilliant video, that would be worth it. But all you do is get a load of girls, give them some silver hot pants and just get them to shake their ass at the camera. It's not worth paying for, people. Really. There's going to be a feminist rant. I can feel it building up. I'm not particularly feminist. I'm not like, yeah, come on, let's burn our bras or anything. But I can feel a bit of anger coming on for a number of reasons and triggers over the past few months. But anyway, the point I was making was this parody comes on and these boys are all like with no top on and they're quite muscly and they're all dancing around. And then at one point, it was really funny, but then I realised that one of the boys came dancing across the screen, sort of hip thrusting a stuffed sheep. I was just like, that's brilliant. I don't think you've even MB'd the fact that he's kind of bumping and grinding with a stuffed sheep. But yeah, when I sent her that picture and I was like, yeah, talk me through this part, she just, I think she actually read at that point. But it's hilarious. It's really funny, really well written, really witty lyrics that they've put over the top. And I actually quite liked Blurred Lines. It was directed by a woman and it was very tongue-in-cheek and she meant it to be like that. But a lot of R&B, I just think it's a load of tosh. It's like Jack Daniels. I wouldn't mop my drains out with it. Getting a little bit. I'm getting on my box, aren't I? We're bring in the soapbox. Yeah, and it was part of this kind of random feminist rant, like a bit of a feminist week. I mean, I used to work in a very male-orientated environment. I was in the military for 6 years. I worked with a lot of men. Never really had a problem with it, but I found ironically, since not being in the military, a lot more snidey discrimination going on, particularly now that I'm a lady of a certain age and I'm expected to be, well, obviously I wear a wedding ring so it's obvious that I'm married, but I'm expected to have children and therefore that makes me completely incapable of working now, quite apparently, in a normal job, because, you know, my kids might need picking up from nursery or something. I'm not really sure why. I don't know if I just go for the kind of jobs where people think women can't do them or what, or that's what I was doing previously anyway. I don't know. I work for myself. I'm a great boss. But it's something that kind of, it crops up again and again, really. And thinking about the Vat Moss thing, there was a kind of underground dissenting feeling that it was an attack on women who have these micro businesses, probably because a lot of designers in the knitting industry who were heavily affected by the Vat Moss legislation that came in are women who are working maybe from home and do perhaps have children. I don't think that's the case. I don't think Vat Moss was an attack on women. I think it was an ill thought out idea that was dreamt up in 2007, and bearing in mind I don't think even Ravelry was going in 2007. If it was, it wasn't anything like the scale it is now. Instagram wasn't going, Facebook was still for people in universities and the rest of the population hadn't really got hold of it yet. So coming up with some way to penalise the big boys, i.e. Amazon and eBay and iTunes, to make them pay VAT in 2007 seemed like a plausible idea. Have a look at the phone that you were using in 2007. Things have moved on. In technology, 8 years is a long time, and they made up an idea, they said they're going to do it. It took them so long to pull their fingers out their backsides to get it sorted that now we're in 2015. Everyone's starting up little niche internet industries, doing loads of good stuff, working from home, having a family, doing loads of brilliant things, offering services, offering choice to people, and they're just going to push it through anywhere, and it's going to now affect a lot of people they never really expected it to affect because they didn't know what was going to happen in terms of the internet explosion, smartphones and everything else that's gone on that drives the kind of digital economy now. I do firmly believe that. I don't believe it was an attack on women at all. But it's easy to see, and it's easy for people to start thinking that when there's so much tosh out there that's just perpetuated like it's okay. And it's not just against women. Loose Women is the worst bit of TV programming I have ever seen in my entire life. It's a programme that's on in the UK. It's led by a panel of 4 complete clackers, women, who just take the piss out of men constantly. They offer no journalistic or any kind of content benefit to anybody. They're just all sat there with the glasses of Lambrino, they may as well be, with a fag in the mouth, taking the mick out of men and completely ripping them. If that was 4 men, there's no way that would be on terrestrial TV. But for some reason, that's acceptable. And it's these kind of myths that are perpetuated, like the woman in Claridge's who was basically kind of told to cover up with a napkin when she was breastfeeding. I mean, totally ridiculous. Don't get me started on breastfeeding. But there were a couple of things that have kind of lit the touch paper for me, in particular, this past couple of days. The first one was someone who sent a very dry tweet, and I did retweet it, so you probably have seen it, about the fact that Benedict Cumberbatch was getting married, and now it's come to light that they're having a child. Congratulations to you both. And I'm sure Benedict Cumberbatch does listen to this. He looks like the kind of guy who likes comedy knitting. And someone put that I do hope that all the journalists remember to ask Benedict Cumberbatch how he intends to balance having a career with fatherhood. And I was just like, that is so on the money. Absolutely bang on the money. Because that is not a question that he will get asked. It just won't happen. But yeah, I'm sure his missus will. And that, between that and the Vax box, that who's the Yorkshire... Kate, she's called. She's a vicar. And she gets trotted out for Gogglebox and stuff like that. She's actually quite funny and quite witty. I like her. And so, again, someone retweeted this and it said, Vax, hoovers for busy mums. And she put, is my other half not capable of any light dusting because he doesn't have a uterus? And I was just like, you go, sister. And it's just complete twaddle that's trotted out. How is this in any way relevant to craft? Well, it is, because there's a lot of twaddle that's trotted out in relation to knitting, and in general that it's only women that knit, only women of a certain age that knit. If you knit, you have too much time on your hands. You need to get a proper hobby, etc. And I just feel sometimes that the anger boiling over from all these stereotypes, really. And I think it's probably partly fueled by the why do I knit clothes that are too big? Because I have a very noisy child downstairs, clearly. It's partly fueled by this kind of generic kind of pressure and these ridiculous stereotypes and ideas. And I just think it's time to break free, really. In the words of Freddie Mercury, legend. I do want to break free from your ridiculous anti-female stereotypes in the media and your ridiculous anti-knitting stereotypes that are going around. There's some brilliant blokes doing some excellent, really artistic work in the knitting world. There are people pushing the boundaries of what's possible. They're building proper sound industries. They're building their own businesses and doing it properly. It's not just some kind of amateur, let me knock out some acrylic baby booties and charge a couple of quid for them and raise money for the hospice, although that is, again, valid, but proper industry and businesses that are putting food on people's tables. And I don't think it should be belittled or mocked, personally. So, yeah, I'm not really sure how I got onto that, such an impassioned rant about that, but there you have it. I've not had a good rant for a long time. on the podcast, but it seems like whenever I get a little bit shouty, people seem to like it and join in. So send in your thoughts. Have you been one of those people that has been belittled for your crafting? Or are you one of those people, those ladies, or even gentlemen, because it does go both ways. Like I said, loose women, cancel this show. It is rubbish. If you've been picked on, if you've been, held to a stereotype, if you've read things and you've just thought that's just utterly ridiculous, send it in. It'd be interesting to get a bit of a discussion and debate going about it, really. So I think after that was a big one. I don't even know if I will even publish it, but let's move on to Enabler's Corner. So I've created another little segment for you, and I'm going to be calling it Enabler's Corner. It seems to be somewhat of a dirty habit of mine to enable people in all areas of their lives to do things that they would like to do, but they just need someone to suggest it gently. As I mentioned last time, I have started a Project 365 over at the Golden Skein called Free Your Skeins 2015. We're on day 11 now and it's going quite well. I'm really enjoying it. I have quite a set schedule of what posts will be on what day. So on certain days of the week I do shawls, or certain day I'll do hands, certain day I'll do hats. And I'm very pleased to say that I've also had a couple of people offer to help with crochet patterns, because crochet isn't a dirty word. And I would love to include crochet patterns, but what I don't want to do is recommend things that are not going to work and not going to be successful. And I don't have the knowledge myself to hand on heart stand there and say, this will work nicely, this isn't going to be a good idea. Not that I'm massively pro knitter, but I do know what sort of bases tend to work for what sort of projects and what things you need to bear in mind. I know a reasonable amount about that, but I don't know a lot about crocheting, particularly not the types of fabric that are produced when you use certain yarns in certain stitch patterns. So I'm very pleased to say that I will have at least one crochet pick per week on one of the days as well. And I'm running it over at www.thegoldenskein.wordpress.com, which is just a blog. The actual website, as I mentioned last time, is just thegoldenskein.com, and eventually the blog will be integrated into the website. We're just looking at how to do that effectively now, but I'm really enjoying it actually. I found some new patterns that I didn't know about. I found some old favourites that I'd forgotten about and have brought them back to the front of my mind and hopefully other people's minds as well. I've very kindly been sent suggestions for different patterns, again of ones that I've not found myself that other people know about and that they've tried perhaps, or that they've got queued that will work quite well. So thank you very much to everyone who sent those in as well. And if you have any suggestions that you want to send in, don't be shy, just ping them over. You know what I'm like, I love reading through patterns, whether they're fringe comedy ones or ones for beautiful yarn. I'm always interested to see what people are creating and how they're going about working with yarn to produce new garments. The whole point of Free Your Skeins 2015 is just to get stuff. It's not to stop buying yarn, because we're not about giving stuff up on this podcast in any way, shape or form, especially not enabling. But it's just to think about ways of getting that stuff, the things you've bought because you love them and because they're pretty and because they made you happy and they were soft in your hands and you wanted them and you could see the potential and the possibilities within them, just to get them out of the cupboard. Get them out of the cupboard and make them into something that you can wear and use as often as you like. And if you're not ready to get them out yet, that's fine, but just to be thinking of different ways and thinking of different options and bringing it to the front of your mind on a daily basis can be quite a creative thing. So I've certainly found that to be the case, so much so that I was brave enough to go over to the Stash Heap challenge group. Now, I was invited to the group by the lovely Sadie, who is White Heart on Ravelry and Twitter, and I very, very much enjoy following her on Twitter, and I've been fortunate enough to meet her in real life. I know she listens to the podcast, but I've met her in real life as well at Unwind Brighton, which was just like, oh, it's nice to finally meet you because I feel like I know you quite well. And she wants to move, you know, help with the stash, downsizing the stash. And it's really kind of started as a group to kind of get your skeins out of stash, because she feels a little bit overwhelmed by her stash, and it's just become this kind of treasure trove, really, of ideas and inspiration. I've found some. I was a bit scared to post at first. I thought if I start telling people I'm doing it, I'm going to have to do it, and I'm not going to stop buying yarn. I'm just going to use some of the stuff I've got. So I didn't know whether that was sort of breaking the rules or something, but it's not at all. It's just about, again, just moving stuff through stash and getting things out, making yourself aware of what you've got in there, clearing out the dead wood, if that's what you want to do, getting your whips and getting them sorted, again, culling the dead wood, focusing on stuff that you want to make, stuff you're actually going to finish, and if there's things that you can't let go of yet, that's absolutely fine too. I find them very, very warm and welcoming, very friendly, and I've dived sort of right in there and laid the gauntlet down that I will catalogue the rest of my stash by the end of today. I'm not going to have pictures for it all, but I'll put it all on there. I hope I have time. I'm going to have to do it because it needs to be done. And I didn't really think I had a stash problem until before Christmas, when I actually put all of the stuff together in a box, and then I could kind of quantify what I had, and it doesn't upset me. I'm quite happy to fill the rest of that cupboard with yarn because it makes me happy. I like collecting things. I've always collected things. I used to collect trolls, then I went on to Beanie Babies, then I went on to, you know, what. I'm always collecting something, and at the moment I'm collecting yarn, and that's fine. But what I don't want to do is to have it and to love it and to never get the benefit of it. So I'll still collect more, but I'm just going to use some of the stuff I've got. And they're very laid back. They're not like Stasi, you've got to use stuff, you're not allowed to buy anything else. Nothing like that. They're just a very enabling group of people. They've got loads of brilliant ideas for how, you know, strategies to approach stashing down or doing whatever you want with your stash this year. They're very knowledgeable. They've got loads of good stories. There are lots of people there who are far worse than me when it comes to whips, which makes me feel better about myself. And they're all really friendly, so that's a big kind of tick from me. If you want to maybe think about moving some stash or getting some ideas about how to do that, that would be a really good group to start in. It's the Stash Heap Challenge group, and I will leave a link in the show notes. You'll see me over there as well, chatting every now and again, and I'm hoping to share a few ideas on the podcast of dealing with different stashy problems in the Enablers Corner. Dealing with your whip issues, dealing with managing your whole yarn inventory, if you will, and patterns as well. And it doesn't just go for yarn, it also goes for sewing fabric, because none of us have any of that. And fibre, no, none of us have any of that. And just kind of taking stock of it and getting control of it and feeling like you know what you're doing with it, really, just organising it all. So get yourself over there if that's something you're looking at doing this year. And also, as part of this whole kind of thing of the past sort of 10 days, I've been inspired to start matching things up from my stash to a pattern that I've chosen during the week. When you write a pattern every day, a pic, post every day, you're always looking, you're always on the lookout for in the hot right now, you're always in the lookout in people's queues, you look at your friends' activity and what they're doing, what they're queuing, what they're favouriting. It really keeps it at the front of your mind, and you're always looking for the possibilities. And then I thought it would be nice to take it one step further. And when you discover this new pattern, or when you rediscover an old pattern that you really love and think, I really want to knit that, I'm going to do a pattern pick per week on my personal blog, which is a blog for the podcast, shoutybees.com, about which pattern I've picked for that week and which yarn in my stash I am going to pair it up with. Now, I'm not going to say I'm going to knit them, because I'm not committing to 52 one-skein projects for the whole year, because that is ridiculous. I don't have that amount of time to knit. I might knit a few of them, I might knit none of them, I might knit all of them eventually, and at some point I'll finish my snow heat hat when I'm 65 and I get some time, and that's absolutely fine. But I found that thinking about it in that way and looking at possibilities for your yarn as well as patterns has been quite cathartic creatively, and it's given me a lot of inspiration and motivation to think about exactly how I'm going to go about doing it, because that is the problem a lot of people have with resolutions. It's not a resolution, but it's an aspiration of mine for the year, is that and in goal setting in general, they'll put a generic goal, but they won't put down exactly what steps they're going to put in place to achieve that. And the more steps you put in place, the higher the likelihood is that you will achieve it. So I've decided to do this post. There will be one a week, and I'm going to call it Free Your Skeins Friday. And on every Friday, and if it isn't on Friday, then it'll be backdated to Friday, so it's on the right days, OCD. I'm going to do a post, and I'm going to match it up to the stuff in my stash. Now, because I'm going to catalogue all my stash today, because I'm a good girl, I'll know exactly what I've got as well, so I can match them up. And like I say, I'm not going to go as far as putting them in bags and printing out the pattern and putting them together or anything like that. I'm just going to explore possibilities with this one and see where that takes me. If it's something that you fancy doing yourself, or something you fancy joining in with, or you have any tips regarding this sort of kind of initiative, then please do get in touch or leave some comments in the Ravelry group, because it'd be really good to hear what you think. And if you have any ideas for your own stash in particular, then go over to the blog page, leave me a link so that everyone can come. I can go and look, most importantly, but everyone else who comes can go and look at what you're doing as well. Make it into a little blog hop perhaps. So that was that. But then we got thinking about planning knitwear for Edinburgh Yarn Festival, because my owls is going to get ripped out, so I now have no signature knitwear to wear for Edinburgh Yarn Festival, which is quite bad when you're a person who works in the yarn industry to not have a suitable wardrobe planned out. So again, it's been mooted a couple of times, and I sort of reinvigorated it yesterday, and I'm going to do a little Owls along. Owls is the jumper by Kate Davies, and if you've been listening to the podcast, you'll know that I cast this on when I was in Africa, and it must have been about 2 years ago now, and I never got past the hem. So it's not a new whip, this is whipping down, because it's not a new whip, it's coming out of hibernation, so this doesn't count as a new project, for me anyway. For everybody else, yes, but it's really quick, it's in chunky yarn, and you know, Edinburgh probably will be quite cold in March, so it's a great quick knit. It's an iconic piece of British design knitwear. Everybody should have one in their kind of clothing knitwear stash, in my opinion. Most people do have one, if not more. But if you want to join in, it's going to be really informal. There's going to be no real organisation around it. Just going to use the hashtag owlsalong. I'll put a little thread in the group, and there's a couple of us already doing it. You can, well, as soon as you get your yarn, you can join in if you want. If you don't want to, you don't have to. Don't worry about it. Dead laid back. And if you want to get yourself an Owls jumper, my kind of deadline for that is Edinburgh Yarn Festival. I think I'm going to talk about planning knitwear for Edinburgh Yarn Festival, or planning your knitwear kind of wardrobe in general in a future episode. I've got a few different topics for discussion since the beginning of the year. It's probably why I'm feeling quite excited, actually, that I think we'll make quite good content for the podcast. It could be quite interesting for you to listen to. So Owls Along is the hashtag, and I'll put a thread in the Ravelry group, so if you want to come and chat about it, probably most of it we'll do on Twitter and Instagram, to be honest, but it's dead cash, dead laid back. Owls is the pattern by Kate Davies, available via Ravelry. Support your local British designers and get some of that chunky yarn out the stash. Get yourself a nice cosy wool jumper. Mine is being knitted in Rowan British Sheep Breeds chunky. Now apparently the notes say that it felts a little bit this, but then I guess if you're wearing a 100% wool, non-superwash, chunky sweater, and you're going to be warm, aren't you? So it's going to get a little bit damp. It probably is going to felt. But I've promised myself once I've done it in this yarn, then I can treat myself to some baby alpaca and do it in that. So that's what I'm going to do. But in the meantime, I'm going to be knitting it in the Rowan Sheep Breeze Chunky. So if you want to join in, hours long is the hashtag, and hopefully we'll see you there. So I have another entrepreneur interview for you today. I'm really enjoying speaking to different people who work within the industry, both on a formal and a more informal basis. I do now work within the industry, obviously I co-own the Golden Skin, and I do freelance as well. And I'm really enjoying the opportunities that are sort of coming my way, very exciting, and enjoying working with other people that I find inspirational. They say you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, so I must be a legend because I'm very lucky. I get to spend time with people that I really bounce off, that I really resonate with, and that share my ideals and priorities really, which is great. As some of you know, I do work over at Eden Cottage Yarns as well with Victoria there, helping do all kinds of dirty enabling really in every kind of sense of the word, which I really enjoy, because I mean, if you've heard the interview that I did with her on the podcast, she's a very inspirational lady. She's very no nonsense, she's very open and honest, she's very straight down the line, she's got a good sense of humour, all of which are qualities I like to think that I have, and I just get on with her really well. We sort of have just clicked massively, and it was a very serendipitous thing for us to start to work together on a more kind of formal basis. And I'm fortunate enough to work with a number of other small businesses and startups as well, which is great. And I really enjoy listening to the different stories that you hear from different people. Bearing in mind we're starting our sock segment, and this lady that I'm going to interview now, Sarah Chai, was the person, she is the Sarah of Socks with Sarah. And part of the reason why I wanted to knit so many socks this year and really get my head into sock knitting and have that sock drawer and learn more about sock knitting and construction and help all of you do that as well, I thought it would be really interesting to get her on board, because she's not in the yarn business as such, or the yarn industry. She's come at this from more of a community building aspect and wanting to build a community around what she's doing and putting herself out there, and other people have just got on board, and it's been great to see over the past year. I've been very much a kind of excited bystander, wishing that I had more time to get involved, and really enjoying seeing everyone's projects and seeing people progress through the year, especially Chloe, as we'll mention when we start chatting, Sparkly She, and how she went from no socks at all to a wardrobe of beautiful socks in a year, and picked up loads of great tips and hints, and everyone learnt from each other. And I thought it would be really nice to go from a kind of more commercial point of view to a more community building aspect, and to see what lessons we can draw out of that. So I'm very, very grateful to Sarah for coming on the show. And I spoke to her on Friday evening. It was quite late here, so you'll have to forgive me. I was quite tired by Friday evening, because I've been single parenting all week, and my husband had come home and I'd kind of just crashed completely. I was definitely in need of some medicinal vino, and it was just to fit our schedules together, because she's in the States and 6 hours behind. It seemed like a good time to fit it in, because she also homeschools. I don't homeschool, but she homeschools like Sally does, Sally Cameron, so it's about fitting in with that as well. So without further ado, I'll go back to the future, to me and Sarah on Friday and our little chat. We do sort of veer off into various things, and she's definitely a lady I would like to go and drink wine with, because I think, again, we share a lot of ideas about education and community and helping other people and championing other people and pom-pom waving and doing all that from a selfless point of view, and doing it because we just enjoy the interactions that we get out of it, and we're not looking to achieve anything in particular in terms of bigging ourselves up. It's just about building that community and widening the network of people that you know and that you can kind of draw from, really, because I'm certainly one of those people that that gets energy from crowds, and I think she is too. So we'll crack on with that interview. So I'm very pleased to be joined this evening and this afternoon because Sarah is in the States and a few hours behind GMT by Sarah of Socks with Sarah fame, who has very kindly agreed to come on the podcast and talk to us in our section and be interviewed. So welcome to the show, Sarah.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
And we are delighted to have you here. It feels like you've been a part of my life for a whole year now. Every time I go on and see these beautiful socks on Instagram, I'm just like, oh, so Sarah did that.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting how social media really brings us all very close together, even though we're very far apart.
Yeah, it is very, very strange. In fact, we were just talking on Twitter earlier, and I was speaking to Chloe, Sparkly Shoe Chloe, who I know you know because she's a prolific Socks with Sarah knitter.
Yes.
And we realised that we've never actually met each other in real life, but we've known each other for about 4 years. And it feels like she's almost like a member of the family. I'm like, yeah, we do know each other in real life, but obviously these are just your friends in the phone, so...
Yep. I feel the same way. I watched her whole Christmas Instagram feed, and it was like the happiest Christmas feed I've ever seen in my life. It made me, like, every day I had smiles, like, all day long, because I'm like, oh, look, she has a Christmas tree. Oh, she has this new little Christmas bit, and it was just like the most uplifting thing. So she brings a smile to my face, and I have definitely never met her. I've only known her through Socks with Sarah, so it's just been about a year, but yeah, I think we've all kind of impacted each other through this very profoundly.
Absolutely. So, shall we kick off with some questions then? And we can go off and onto a tangent and talk about socks wherever you like. But can you tell us a bit about you as a person and a little bit about how you came to be interested in yarny pursuits?
Sure. Well, I grew up in the country, like a very rural setting, and my parents both came from very modest backgrounds. So, I mean, I grew up in a house where my mom sewed and hand tied most of our quilts. She made a lot of my clothes. She is a prolific crocheter, and my dad does a lot of woodworking. He does small engine repair and all this kind of stuff. So I kind of grew up in an atmosphere where I just took for granted that we made really great things from very simple beginnings. And I didn't really pick up a whole lot of that stuff in earnest until I finished with my degree in college, because, you know, when you're in college, you don't have a lot of time to do that kind of stuff. But I learned how to knit right after getting out of college, and then it all kind of went from there. That I got married and I had a family, and then I started to knit more and I started to sew more and kind of just got back to my roots in that way.
Brilliant. So the next question would usually be, what was the tipping point that turned your hobby into a business? Now, Socks with Sarah isn't a business, it's more of a community that you've built. So what was the tipping point that made you decide that you'd like to foster and build an online community around knitting?
Well, what's interesting is about 5 or 6 years after I learned how to knit, I was in a local yarn shop, and I had kind of gotten to know the owner a bit, and she had seen some of my work, and she asked me if I wanted to teach. And at first I said absolutely not, because I had 2 little kids and I didn't think I had the time, and I also had never taught knitting before, so I thought this was way beyond me. And then I went home and I thought about it, and I'm like, I think I can do it. So then I started teaching, and I did that for a couple of years, and what happened was I'm very much somebody who likes to connect with people. I like to have like a community of knitters or friends that to inspire me as far as like my craft goes. And because I was only in the classroom for a couple hours a week, I kind of felt like I was missing something, because I had these wonderful contacts and these wonderful people that I was meeting and that were inspiring me every week, but I had such limited interactions with them because of my obligations to my family and my obligations to the job and all those different things. So that's when I started to build my blog. was kind of to extend myself and to build myself a community that I could access anytime that I wanted instead of just the 2 hours or the 3 hours I was in the classroom each week. So from building the blog, then once I could no longer, I had to leave teaching because my husband went through a job change and my parents had some health issues that I had to help them out with. And then my blog kind of became more central to the community building that I had wanted, and I started to have more time and more motivation to do more with it. So that's kind of where first I started with the Mary Knit Along, and then this past year with Socks with Sarah, and it's kind of been slow and persistent community building and the interactive community building for those last couple of years.
Yeah, because I remember in the beginning of Socks with Sarah, and one of your kind of central kind of facets to it really was not necessarily to knock out hundreds of pairs of socks, but to make knitting and sock knitting a part of your daily life and to fit that in around your other commitments.
Yeah, and I think that that's what I always try to focus on with the community that I want to cultivate, like that's associated with my blog, is just I want people to be able to be included no matter how much time that they have. Because, you know, most people that I know, most knitters that I know are working full time and have kids and don't have time to knock out, like, you know, like you said, like a bazillion pairs of socks in a year. Like most people can't knit a pair of socks in a week because there just isn't the time. I'm lucky in that my life is pretty flexible and that I have more time like on and off to knit throughout the day than a lot of people. But I think it's always been paramount in how I set up the community that I want to host, that it's inclusive. I want I want anybody who wants to join to be able to. I don't want a lot of rules and regulations that exclude people. I want everybody involved.
Yeah, I've found myself nodding along like a little nodding dog here and agreeing with everything you're saying there, because sometimes it can feel a little bit like a person on the outside looking in, and that's never a feeling I've had with Socks with Sarah, even halfway through the year where a lot of friendships and kind of relationships have built and people know each other quite well. It's never had that exclusive feel. It's always felt like somewhere you could kind of just walk in with your knitting and sit down.
And I think that's the kind of person that I am. I would much rather include people in my life than cut them out. I think I learned stuff from everybody. When I was in the classroom, I learned from students constantly. You know, when I sit down and I knit with friends, I learn things from them. And I think that's the kind of community that is really beneficial to everybody, is when no matter if this is your first pair of socks or your, 200th pair of socks, it doesn't matter. We all have something to learn from each other and we all benefit from being together.
Absolutely. 100% agree with that. Again, I was nodding away. It's true. It is. And I think that's probably why I wanted to talk to you so much in an interview and get your point of view, because I did really feel that was something that I identified with and believe very strongly in as well. So,
and I think like as the industry itself, there are times when you can be involved with groups or with, obviously when you're in an industry and you're trying to sell a product, you want to inspire people to knit more and to get more of your stuff, right? I mean, that's like how a business works. But at the same time, I think we can do that without overwhelming people. I think we can reach a whole lot of people if we make it so that you move at your pace, you set the rules for you, and you can still be involved. And I think that's where we all get the best, the biggest benefits.
Yeah, definitely. So thinking about inspiring people then and involving people and encouraging everyone to come and take part in whatever kind of capacity they want to, what is your favourite quote that you turn to for inspiration?
Well, of course, I've been thinking about this a lot because I'm very much, if you read my blog, I'm hung up on my words, right? I use a lot of words because I have always been a reader and a writer. So when I really boiled it down to what's like that one thing that always kind of, is the spark that gets me going and keeps me going, it's from this very I don't know if it's a cult classic, but it's the movie Before Sunrise. I don't know if you've ever seen it. But there's this fortune teller or a palm reader who reads somebody's palm, and as she's walking away, she says, "Don't forget, you are stardust." And that one has always stuck with me because it reminds me to be very humble because I am just this tiny little piece of the universe. So, it reminds me to have a sense of humor, don't take myself too seriously because I am just this one little person in this whole big bad world. But I also remember that, at my core, I come from something really spectacular and my roots are something really amazing. So, we should never be afraid to live up to that.
No, that's really good. I like that. Again, I was nodding away again. Oh, seriously, I'm almost fangirling you now. Moving on before it gets embarrassing. No journey is ever.
They've been great.
I know, it's terrible. No journey's ever a smooth one, and obviously running a business and building a community, which is what you've done, has its ups and downs. Can you tell us about a time where you feel that you've kind of failed, or things didn't go to plan? What happened, and what did you learn as a result of it?
Yeah, well, obviously, I have made a lot of errors. I put my foot in my mouth a lot, which it happens. We all do it. But I guess one thing that came to mind when I was thinking about this was that it takes me back to when I was teaching, when I was in the classroom, and I was teaching the last installment of a sock knitting class and how to graft the toe. And I had a few very veteran knitters in the class and some more newbies. Sometimes people just take classes to go with friends and whatnot. So you sometimes get a mix of skill levels. And I had never anchored the first 2 stitches down before. And because I was self-taught as far as grafting goes, and the book I learned from didn't anchor those first 2 stitches. And I kind of had a friendly mutiny in my classroom where everybody's like, you have to do it, you're wrong. And, it's one of those moments where I'm standing up in front of this group and I'm being told that I'm wrong. And it's really intimidating. But what I took from it is that, I didn't get really frustrated or flustered or defensive. You can kind of take those mistakes that you make and just recognize that you're human. Everybody in that room is human, and that if you approach your mistakes with honesty, you don't try to, pull the fleece over anybody's eyes. Just say, hey, I've never done this before like this. I'm really glad that you showed me this. And, just have a sense of humor about it. Sometimes we're going to screw up and it's okay.
Yeah, definitely. And I completely agree with if you think you might have done something a bit wrong or you don't 100% know, putting your hands up is the best option every time, because people find it very hard to carry on going, you're still doing this wrong, if you just got, what, you're right, actually, can you show me your way, because that looks quite interesting.
Well, and that's one of the things that I love about the community that, I have online. I loved about teaching is that, you can really set the tone and say, you can correct me. I want you to correct me. I just last week, I put up a blog post about, or maybe it was earlier this week, I can't remember, but about how I match my stripes on my socks when I have self-striping yarn. And the lady whose yarn, String Theory Colorworks, that I was using, she posted it on Facebook. And she automatically had 2 or 3 people come up and say, I do it this way, I do it differently. And I think that's great. I don't know everything. I know a lot. I'm a skilled knitter. I've been knitting for long enough and I've done enough projects, but I have a lot of confidence in my knitting, but I have enough confidence that I don't mind being corrected and I don't mind being shown different ways of doing things. And I think that's important.
Yeah, and I think it's something that you find is a common trait amongst educators, and that is why people tend to go into teaching, is they don't think they have all the answers, and actually part of the enjoyment of being a teacher and sharing your knowledge with people is actually the knowledge you get back from your students and the learners.
Exactly. And I think that's like the whole vibe of the Knitting Sarah, community, and like the Socks Sarah knit along and all that. It's like, it's very nice because I think between me and all the people involved, I think it's just a very positive, very nurturing environment for asking those kinds of questions and for correcting and sharing our different points of view.
So we've gone from your learning point there that you've shared with us, and can you tell us now about what the high point of your journey has been so far?
Yeah, I think, it's not, I like to think of it more kind of like, I don't know, teaching was really rewarding for me because I loved being hands-on and I loved learning from people. I loved teaching people. When I started the Mary Knit Along and I had like a pretty warm response to it, that was very rewarding. And then when Socks with Sarah, when I launched that, I literally thought I'd have like a dozen people join. So when, my hits went off the charts the day I announced it on my blog and I had loads of people, asking to join, it was really amazing to me that I could come from this small town knitting teacher to all of a sudden having this like global, group of people who want to do this with me. It's really humbling and really amazing for me. So that's definitely been a high point. But overall, I have to say that just my daily interactions with comments on the blog and on the, Friends of Knitting Sarah Ravelry group, that is far and away. As exciting as like, the Socks of Sarah Knit Along and the Mary Knit Along and all those things kind of blowing up has been, the daily interactions are definitely my constant high point.
Oh, brilliant. So, what would you say then has been the best piece of advice you've ever received?
Well, and this was another one I had to think about a long time. But I think I have to give credit to my husband because he is a very big picture thinker. He is always planning for 6 months down the road and, a year down the road and 10 years down the road. And I'm very much a day-to-day, emotion to emotion kind of person. And there have been times where it's kind of, I lose sight of the big picture. And he always just kind of says, stay the path, be true to who you are, and your voice, who you are. And he says, don't worry about what everybody else is doing, what everybody else is saying, you just be you. And I think it's that authenticity is what has given me whatever measure of success I've had is.
I totally agree with him as well. Again, he got a really big nod. A really big nod. And a big...
No sighs from the pod pups.
No, they're fully on board. It's true, it is, because like you say, it's these daily interactions that you have with people. If you're not your authentic self and you're not being true to who you are, you won't have the stamina to run 2-year-long knit-alongs back to back, and you won't be able to keep that up in every single interaction that you have with people.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's very, very clear to a reader when you have somebody who's like really speaking from the heart and when somebody who is kind of a little bit more filtered. And I think that when you get me, you get me. You get me unfiltered exactly as I am, because that is what I know how to do and that is who I know how to be. And that's what you're guaranteed to get no matter how you catch me. It's not always pretty, but it is always 100% honest.
That is the main thing, definitely. So we'll start going on to the more fun and less serious questions, although this one could be either, depending on how you look at things. Which one thing that you know now did you wish you had known when you picked up that first ball of yarn?
I have to say, don't join a ball of yarn on the front of your sweater right in the middle of a row. I learned to knit on a sweater, and it's like it was a cardigan, and you did the back first and then the two fronts and the sleeves and you sewed all together. And I joined one ball of yarn right on the left shoulder, like just where it's front and center visible, and I did a really not great job of it. Like it's not invisible at all. And every time I look at it, that's the one thing where I look at that sweater and I'm like, this thing would look so good for a beginner. I mean, it looks good for a beginner, but it would look so amazing if I had not done that. So when you think you can, skimp by on those little details, like joining a ball of yarn, just know that you really can't. You need to just take the time to do it right. It's worth it.
Brilliant. So, the random question. This is one of my favourite questions ever. Everybody knows that knitters love cake. If you were a cake, which would you be and why?
Well, I had no idea how to answer this at all. I know what kind of cake I like, but I don't know that they're really necessarily what cake I would be if I was cake. So I took a really, I'm sure, scientific BuzzFeed quiz for what type of cake I would be because I didn't really know how else to narrow it down. And I figured, I'll go to like the, high-tech scientific Facebook quiz. So what they told me is that I am a cupcake because I am, quote, dangerously addictive, yet have a welcoming exterior. So I'm going to go with that because I think that's better than any answer I could come up with.
Hey, I like it. I like your attitude to coming up with an answer to a question. And clearly, Facebook it is the future when it comes to things like that. It is.
No lab is going to have better results than a Facebook quiz. So
It is quite a risky strategy, though, because anything could have come out in that. You'd no idea what kind of cakes were available.
No, I know. But, I just, in our house, we go big or we go home, and we commit. So when I found that quiz, I'm like, this is the way I'm going.
I love it. It's brilliant. All right, so you might have answered this with Facebook. What's your favourite or go-to resource for yarn craft, or kind of business and building a community and blogging that you couldn't do without?
I have to say I would definitely go with Ravelry because I think if you're a knitter or a spinner, especially a knitter, a crocheter, but especially a knitter, that you're just not going to have the opportunity to build community quite like you will on Ravelry because your audience is all right there. I use all sorts of different things. It's, my blog talks to my Facebook and my Facebook talks to my Twitter. And obviously, like, Instagram is a really good one now, too, that seems to be growing like gangbusters. But the roots are really Ravelry. I go to that for my own references, for finding patterns. I look up yarns on it. I'm on it every single day. And as far as building a community, I mean, having those groups that you can join and talk with and ask questions and all that stuff, it's really just a great overall platform for anybody in the craft, I think.
Yeah, Ravelry is a very popular answer to this question. It is. I mean, it's, I say it every time. I wonder if they knew what it would turn into when they started it.
I would guess not, because, I mean, I think with you starting the Golden Skein, I know you probably feel the same way as I do starting my blog. It's like you kind of take that leap and hope that it grows into something that you have in your mind's eye. But it's like you never quite know where it's going to take you. There's always different bends and different things around each corner that you can't quite anticipate.
Yeah, definitely. But that's part of the excitement of it, I think, of forging out and doing something like that and just seeing what happens.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Right, I don't think I'm gonna catch you out, but I'm gonna throw you a curveball.
Okay.
Desert island discs, or rather desert island skeins. If you were going to be marooned on a desert island, and you could only take one skein of yarn with you, which dyer would you take it from?
Well, it'd have to be something I could knit and reknit, right? So I have to think about what would withstand reknitting really well and what would hold its color really well. So I would have to say that I would actually go with my favorite, I talk about her a lot, is Cloud Lover Yarn and Fiber. She does fiber, so I do a lot of my spinning from her fiber, but also she does some really nice sock yarn. And what I really like about it is it's a really good base. It definitely holds up really well, and her dyes and her colors really hold up they keep their color very well. So I think I would go with her.
Good choice. I think I would go with, not that I'm asking me any questions, but I would go with Regia, the German sock yarn.
Oh yeah,
That's guaranteed for 10 years. It'll last forever. I reckon it'll last longer than acrylic.
Oh
So I
yeah.
would go with them, which is a bit bad for someone who runs a hand-dyed yarn
No, but
pushing business.
that is a good point because that is it's a workhorse. It really is. It's kind of like a if you've ever used Cascade 220 for worsted, just general sweater work, like that one is just it'll live forever. It just kind of keeps going and going, and it's a good like value yarn too. It's a workhorse, and much like Regia.
Yeah, it's all good. So I think we will wrap up the question part with asking you whether you have any parting words of advice for those people out there either looking to kind of forge out an industry within knitting, or maybe build a community around something within the knitting industry they're very interested in. And afterwards you can tell us where the listeners can find you, and then we'll say farewell.
Okay. I guess my advice, that if I had to give advice to somebody trying to do something like what I'm doing, is to remember that, you know how they always say no man is an island? I think that no knitter is an island. And I think where I have made the best of connections in the industry, where I have been, where I have gained the most strength and just the most, where I've made the best connections is when is to remember that to give credit where credit is due. I think that a lot of people, I think there's such a push to be a unique individual and to set yourself apart. But I think sometimes what we miss is that you actually build yourself up when you're building other people up. And I think that is one of those, it's really a cornerstone of what I do, is that it's not about, I mean, if I knit a pair of socks, I am always going to be pointing my finger at the person who dyed that yarn because they're the one that's making me look good. My knitting is great, but without this yarn, it doesn't look the same. So I think pointing to the people who are inspiring you, the other writers who inspire you, the designers who are designing that you're knitting, designing the designs that you're knitting, and the people who are dyeing the beautiful yarns that we're using. I think making all of those connections and giving all of those people credit is really, it builds up your name as much as it builds up theirs. So I think you can really build your business on helping other people grow too.
Sarah, because we got a little bit distracted talking about everything, life, the universe and everything, can you please let the listeners know where we can find you?
Yes, my blog is at knittingsarah.com. And I'm also Knitting Sarah on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And if you want to find me on Ravelry, I am the Knitting Sarah, all one word, because I didn't get super creative there. And I do host the Friends of Knitting Sarah group on Ravelry, which everyone is welcome to join.
Obviously, you've done the Merry Knit Along, which lasted for a year.
Uh-huh.
Then you did Socks with Sarah, which lasted for a year. It's due to finish kind of any day now. What's your plan for next year?
Well, this next year, I kind of get the impression, or I got the impression from readers, that the whole year-long knit-along was, you know, after 2 years, I didn't want to put any pressure on any of my readers to do another year-long knit-along, because it's really a big commitment, even if it's a few stitches a day like Socks with Sarah was. So what I'm going to work on this year is I'm doing a project that it's a very, very simple, and I've been doing it for years, but I kind of opened it up to everybody, where it's just to take a snapshot of your work every day. So I have a hashtag that's just hashtag today on my needles. And I'm encouraging everybody just to, whatever you're working on during the day, just to take a snapshot and post it up either on Instagram, or I have a thread in my Friends of Knitting Sarah Ravelry group where you can share those pictures. And if you're a spinner, you can do today on my wheel or today on my spindle. And it's just a way to kind of build the story of a project, because the best comments I get when I write about my work and about my knitting projects is when I kind of share a timeline of how a project evolves. And I think that it's really rewarding if you do this, where you're taking a picture every day. It kind of helps to motivate you to stay on your projects, but it also is a really neat thing to be able to go and look back at your work and see where you came from and what kind of transpired throughout it. And I think I will focus personally on telling those stories on my blog. However, everybody else wants to do it is up to them, whether it's just the picture, or if they want to start telling stories too. I think that's great, because who doesn't like to hear the story of how a project came to be, right?
No, definitely. And it is something really accessible. And yeah, it is a year-long thing, but how easy is it to quickly take a picture and put it on Instagram? You're probably going to be doing it anyway.
Yep. And I have been doing, usually I will take a picture on Instagram and then I share it on my blog, not as like a main story, but kind of back in the little stories. Like there's a main kind of roll of stories that goes in the headline area of my blog, and then down below you'll find all the Today on My Needles and Today on My Wheel links, because I have had the category on my blog for years, ever since it started, like 4 or 5 years ago. I've had this thing going. I just haven't been quite as dedicated. So what I like about it is it's a very quick way to add something to my blog, so people have something new daily. It's also something really easy to do on Instagram that's just, it gets you out there every day, so it helps you to make those connections, but it also is really beneficial to you to motivate you, to get you to keep working, and also so that you can see, like I said, where you came from and how your projects evolved. So it does a lot of really good things, and it's very simple. It only takes a couple minutes.
So yeah, well, I think I better let you go and get back to long division. It's a very important life skill.
Yes, well, I keep telling my son, because we were doing proportions alongside it, and I use proportions all the time with knitting. So I'm like, we have to do this. It's fundamental. In my head, I'm like, if you want to be a knitter, but then I'm like, if you want to be a scientist, you have to do this.
Lovely. Well, thank you very much for your time, because I know you are very busy. I'm very conscious of that.
Yep, and thank you so much. I really enjoyed this.
Ah, cool. And hopefully we'll chat again soon. I really did honestly find myself nodding along massively and agreeing with a lot of stuff you said. And if there is an opportunity for us to have wine and put the world to rights, I think we absolutely should take it.
Absolutely. I agree. Someday I'm going to make it back across the pond.
So I'm afraid that's all we've got time for this week. There may have been a couple of chops and changes there, because it wasn't unfortunate, it was very good fun chatting to Sarah for about an hour, but unfortunately not all of the things I could include or indeed were suitable for including for public ears. So if it is a little bit choppy and changey, particularly towards the end, then I do apologise for that. But I very much enjoyed talking to her, and I hope you enjoyed listening to her interview as well. So all that remains for me is to say have a great week, happy crafting, and speak to you all again soon. Bye. Thank you for listening to the Shiny Bees podcast. Show notes to this episode can be found on the blog at www.shinybees.com. I'm Shiny Bees on Ravelry, Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest and Facebook, so feel free to give me a shout. Or you can email me at shinybeesinfo@gmail.com. Music for this episode is provided courtesy of Music Alley and is by Adam and the Waltz Boys. It's I Need a Drink.
Need a friend.